Our next speaker is from the UAE Central Bank, Mr. Shokoli. He's an advisor to His Excellency, the Governor of Central Bank of the UAE. His major responsibilities include the implementation of the FinTech strategy and establishment of the FinTech office for the Central Bank of the UAE, implementation of the national payment strategy, and the continued enhancement of the financial market infrastructure of the UAE, and the provision of advisory support to the digital transformation of the Central Bank of UAE. Prior joining Central Bank of UAE, Shokoli was the Executive Director of the Financial Infrastructure Department of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Welcome, Shokoli, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for the introduction.
So I know I'm going to be sharing your presentation for you. Just give me a minute. Okay, are you able to see?
I think so, yes.
Let me just switch to presenter view. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so you help me to move the slides.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, do I still have 15 minutes or?
Yes, you do. You have 20 minutes actually, yes.
All right, okay. Yeah, next page, please. Okay, what I'm going to cover today is two major areas. One is about the payment regulations that have been just recently issued by the central bank, and also I think Peter, I think there's some initiative that already mentioned by Peter, and the next one I would like to cover a little bit more is about the guidance on enabling technology that kind of jointly developed by 4 regulatory authorities in the UAE together, and is still under the development stage, but I will cover a little bit more. Next page, please. Yeah. Okay. Before going to the detail, I would like to sit back a little bit about the thinking of the Central Bank of the UAE when we look at the fintech development. We have already formulated a fintech strategy and how we are going to build the fintech ecosystem for the UAE as a whole. Before doing that, and then we think a really effective, robust strategy requires a very strong foundation. And then we start thinking what are the key pillars in order to support or provide a foundation for the entire fintech strategy in order to build a mature fintech ecosystem. 2 things we believe that are essential in order to really provide the foundation of the fintech strategy. One is a very robust and also balanced regulation or regulatory framework for fintech. The second major pillar is the digital infrastructures. So we are moving ahead to build the 2 things in order to provide the foundation. And then on top of that, we have a number of building blocks in order to support the ecosystem. But today I focus more on the regulations. What regulations that have been done or under development by the Central Bank UAE, working together with other relevant stakeholders. When we look at the regulations, we need to develop the first set of regulations that we believe they are essential and very important for the fintech development is payments. And you look at the evolution of all these fintech activities in the past like 5 to 10 years. A lot of things start evolving from payments. And then after having a very robust payment infrastructures, services, and then a lot of other fintech related services can be built on top of that. And then some example we can refer to, like China. If you look at China, we can see all those e-commerce development, then they have a very effective payment engines and payment services. On top of that, then they build a lot of other innovative financial services based on the technologies. So because of that, last year we spent quite a lot of effort to do quite detailed research, benchmarking around all the major markets in the world. And then we eventually determined a regulatory framework for payments involving 4 major regulations. The first one is stored value facilities regulation, and that was completed and issued, I think, in around October last year. And basically, it's e-money schemes. And when we did the benchmarking and research, in Europe, mainly this kind of instruments, they call e-monies or e-money schemes. And in Asia, like Singapore, Hong Kong, they call it stored value facilities. And then we eventually decided, okay, to give the name stored value facilities, basically e-money schemes in other jurisdictions. And then we provide a very balanced, robust framework to allow, we actually put in a lot of provisions to allow fintech companies or payment or non-bank payment service providers to have the opportunity to come to the UAE to start their business. And we have reduced the capital requirements, and also we moved the requirement to be a licensed entity without any joint venture to be set up with a local bank. So we relaxed quite a lot of areas in order to allow more participants to enter to the market. And then we also look at, from payment perspective, infrastructure or payment systems are key before you have payment services on top of it. And then we look at the existing payment system that are in operation in the country or even in overseas. Large value payment systems and retail payment system are the 2 major categories of all these payment infrastructures. For large value payment systems, mainly, I mean, these systems are running, operated by the central bank. And then also, even the central bank system, we are also subject to the payment system oversight and subject to the international PFMI requirements. So we have a regulation on large value payment systems that are comprising licensing as well as destination requirements. In our regulation, all large value payment systems, number one, need to be licensed by the central bank first. If they are operated, developed by the central bank, these systems are deemed to be licensed already. And then if this system is a systemically important system, i.e. they can have financial stability impact or kind of public interest angle that will affect the financial system operation, we will designate them as systemically important payment system. So that is large value payment system. On the retail payment system, most of them are operated by the commercial sector. And then these systems are also subject to a licensing as well as a destination regime. We want to capture all retail payment systems that are in operation in the UAE. So we have a licensing regime, but it's relatively light touch approach. We capture all these in our radar screen, and then we will assess whether they are systemically important. If they are, then this retail payment system will be subject to more stringent requirements after destination by the central bank. But the benefit of a destination or becoming a systemically important payment system, the central bank will grant finality to the system, i.e. any transaction being cleared and settled by the system will be final. It will not be reversible. So it is kind of certainty to these systems and also beneficial for the participant using these systems. And the third one is, I would say, is more forward-looking when we look at the retail payment services and card schemes operations. I will cover a bit more detail in the next few pages because we also put in the crypto asset component to that. And after we're doing quite in-depth research in many jurisdictions, this development, I would say, is one of the first among a lot of major markets. Next page, please. Okay, the retail payment services regulation, we have not issued this one yet. and is subject to the final review from the AML perspective, because FATF have just recently issued the virtual asset and virtual asset service providers requirements. So we also want to take a final look of whether this regulation has covered the necessary requirements from FATF. So we expect in maybe a month's time that we will finalize everything, and this final piece of regulation will be issued very soon. If we look at this, okay, as I said at the beginning, we categorize into 4 areas: the e-money scheme or store-ready facility, and then we look at the systems. Now we are looking at the retail payment services, normally running on top or on top of the market infrastructure. And then we take a very in-depth review or research of the market, and also, you know, in other jurisdictions. We identify 9 major payment services currently in operation, or maybe in operation in the country. Okay, and I'm not going to go through 9 of them, but you can see that here. And then we categorize them by license type. But the major thing I would say, okay, we cover merchant acquiring, cross-border transfer, domestic transfer, payment account, etc. But I would say 2 major areas that, in a way, is quite a new kind of development from the central bank perspective. Even I think in the UAE, we also paved the way for other further development in FinTech. Okay, we have the payment account initiation. That what it means is a part of, you know, in the Europe open banking. Okay, when you do open banking, and all these APIs allow initiation of transactions, and most of them will be payments. So we put that licensing requirement there to pave the way, and the next thing central bank will do very soon is open finance. Okay, we don't talk about open banking only, because central bank also cover insurance, and also we look at financial services as a whole. So we use the term open finance instead of open banking. So that payment initiation licensing category or type will have kind of paved the way for the future open finance development. The next one is the crypto thing, the crypto asset, or we call it payment tokens in this regulation, focusing on payments. A very common example is a stable coin. That will be a kind of payment tokens that, if it's issued in the UAE, trade in the UAE, or used in the UAE, that will be subject to the licensing requirement of the central bank. Next page, please. Okay, on top of that, within the retail payment services regulation, we also put in the card schemes, because we want to have a holistic, complete coverage of all payment system and services. And card schemes is another thing we think we need to bring into our regulatory framework, and then subject to the central bank licensing. Card schemes, basically, credit cards, debit card schemes, and all these card schemes, if they have particular domestic schemes in the country, that will be subject to the licensing and regulation of the central bank. Next page. Okay, I hope that gives you a comprehensive overview. When we do the policy thinking about virtual or crypto asset, because there are all kind of crypto assets or virtual assets in operation or in use in the world. So we try to have a classification of them, okay, and then we come up 4 types of tokens, cover all kind of crypto assets. The first one is security token. Okay, you can see some typical examples that we put on screen, and then commodity token, and virtual asset token, and payment token. Payment token, sometimes people may call it fiat token, or as I say, you know, the stable coin, USD coin. All these are typical examples of the payment token. And then in terms of the services, we will regulate, okay, if it is fall under payment token, whether it's issuing, buying, selling, facilitating, exchange, brokering, P2P payment, custodian, etc., that will be subject to the central bank, okay? And then for security and commodity, that will subject to ESCA requirements. But for virtual asset token at the moment, it is an area we need to look further, because of the new FATF requirements for all virtual assets has to be licensed or registered, or you have to do something of that from an AML perspective. So that's the area initially I mentioned, we still need to look further how we are going to cover the virtual asset token. Next page, please. Okay, that flow hopefully will give you some idea how we classify them, and when a particular crypto asset come into the picture, first of all we look at that, does it offer an equity or a debt claim? If it is a security token, that will be subject to SCA, the Securities and Commodity Authority regulator in the country to regulate them, and we have already in agreement with SCA doing this. If it is not a security token, then we'll fall to another category for review. Does it offer access to services from issuers or ecosystem? Yes, it's a commodity token. If no, and then we go to the next kind of filtering process. Is it backed by a fiat currency? If yes, then it will become a payment token that will be subject to the licensing requirement of the central bank. If no, it will be a virtual asset token. At the moment, as I said, virtual asset token is not licensed or regulated by neither central bank or SCA. And this is an area from an AML perspective, because it's not payment. In a way, it's not a kind of security or commodity instruments. So it's not being caught by either regulators. So we need to look at that from an AM perspective. How are we going to satisfy the FATF requirements? And that would be some work to be done in the near future. Okay, next page, please. Okay, after the payment regulation, okay, because all these regulations are in a very kind of detailed coverage, and the first 3 regulations, you can come to our website, the central bank website, you can take a look at that. And the retail payment services and cash schemes regulation will come out very, very soon. And if people have any questions or try to understand a bit better, you can send to the FinTech mailbox of the central bank, and then we will try to provide support or clarification. The next one, okay, this is the guidance note. We are working with 4 regulators. Okay, as Peter also mentioned in his presentation. Okay, next page, please. Okay, we start with payments first last year, and then I think near the end of last year, and we start thinking FinTech as a whole, or technologies as a whole, particularly for enabling technologies. We think there's a need to issue some guidance. We won't call it a mandatory regulations, because we need to look at that from a risk base and also try to have an agreeable baseline guidance for all regulators or for the country as a whole. So at this stage, we are thinking, okay, it's a guidance note, but at the same time, there are some basic principles for each area. Each regulator will try to make it as a kind of mandatory requirements from high-level principle perspective for their licensed entities. And the objective is, we want to provide some guidelines or guidance, and also some suggestions to the financial institutions when they adopt enabling technologies. So that hopefully we will have a baseline, a minimum kind of standard for the country as a whole, if all these technologies being used, adopted in the country, and how we manage the risk. As I said, we have 4 regulators working together: the central bank, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority from ADGM, and the FSA from the IFC, and also the securities regulator, SCA. We kind of jointly work on this document or this guidance. We have been working on that for, I think, nearly 6 months. Very soon we will come to the kind of consultation process, and we are still discussing how are we going to do it, because each regulatory authority have their own policy and process. And then we try to agree a common process, if possible, how we go out to the industry to get feedback. Okay, next page, please. Okay, and there are 5 kind of enabling technologies we try to focus, at least at the first step. Okay, in future we may add more when we see more enabling technologies. So as I say, the key principles, we expect the licensed entities, they have to observe the key principles, but the detailed guidance is a kind of guidance notes for licensed institution to consider. But having said that, I mean, they if they don't adopt any of these suggested guidance, they need to do their own risk assessment and why they don't follow. And there's a good reason behind, although it's not mandatory. On the areas that we cover, API, biometrics, big data analytics, and artificial intelligence, and DLT or distributed ledger technology, and cloud computing. We see all these 5 will be the key technological building blocks when you adopt this technology. So we, based on these 5, we develop the details. Okay, next page, please. Okay, so each of them, we have a very detailed kind of coverage. For example, the APIs, we cover in terms of the governance, architecture, design, standardization, management and monitoring, and outsourcing. And for AI, big data, we have look at the materiality, governance, model design, model management, ethics, customer protection angle. Biometrics, we look at the identity proving and enrollment, ongoing authentication, identity lifecycle management, managing and monitoring, data management, outsourcing. And cloud, okay, I'm not going to repeat all this, but these are the areas we will have very detailed guidance whenever a financial institution try to adopt API or cloud computing or DLT or artificial intelligence. And I think this document, I can see even for the fintech companies or other payment service providers, it's a good document for them to make reference if they really want to adopt these technologies. Because at the end of the day, at some stage, they may want to come to the regulatory authority to apply for a license. If they can already build in their policies and procedures of all these requirements, that definitely will help them for risk management or for future licensing application as well. Okay, I think I finished my 15 minutes, maybe a little bit overrun. Okay, I better stop here. Thank you very much.